History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to this 572nd episode of the History Goes Bump podcast, Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this episode, we're featuring a hotel that we just stayed in Louisville, Kentucky, or should I say Louisville?
Louisville.
The Seelbach Hotel.
Oh my gosh, this hotel is gorgeous.
The minute I went in and saw what the prices were to stay there, at least during the time that we were there, which is after Christmas and probably not a good season for them because it's cold and everything, I was like, we can afford that. We're staying at the Seelbach. I've always wanted to stay there.
Yeah, it was less expensive than the couple of little bitty hotels we stayed at I think on the way up and the way back.
Yeah, it was cheaper than the Comfort Inn or something. Yep. I was like, okay, we're staying. And apparently it is quite haunted. So we are going to share the stories of the hauntings here with you, which include the Lady in Blue and her story. Before we get into that, we want to welcome into the Spooktacular crew, Deb, Ruth Ann, Deidre, who spells her name with 2 E's, Sammy with a Y, and New England Legends.
Thank you so much for joining the Spooktacular crew.
And now, this moment in oddity.
The moment in oddity was suggested by Dewey Oxberger. There is a lovely little Asian plant that blooms early to midsummer. It is commonly known as the Asian umbrella leaf, or skeleton flower. The plant is native to Japan and can be found in the mountainous regions of both Japan and China. They prefer cool temperatures and partial to complete shade and can be grown in zones 4 through 9. Its delicate white blooms with yellow centers do not look like anything too unusual. There is something that makes this plant very unique, however. Anytime the flowers become wet, they become transparent like glass. Then, once they dry out, they return to their normal white color again. They are a lovely, whimsical choice for the correct growing environments. They are a slow-growing, deciduous perennial. We, of course, had to research these plants for home growing with a name like skeleton flower. Sadly, where we live in Florida, the summers are just too hot and humid, which would stress these plants. They can be ordered online for those avid gardeners who have the correct growing environment. These distinctive, delicate flowers that can turn to glass with some droplets of water certainly are odd.
Are you afraid of the dark? That's just silly. What you should be afraid of is the thing that watches you sleep.
And now this month in history.
In the month of January, on the 25th, in 1533, King Henry VIII married his second wife, Anne Boleyn. During this time, Henry broke away from the church and he declared himself the head of the Church of England. This allowed him to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, and marry his mistress, Anne Boleyn. Catherine of Aragon had provided King Henry 6 children, but only a daughter survived. Henry wanted a son, and Catherine's longest living son had only survived 52 days. The divorce happened in January 1533, and shortly thereafter, Anne was married to the king. Her coronation would come in May of that year, but a male heir from her would never come to fruition. In 1536, Anne was arrested on false charges of heresy, adultery, and treason. She was thrown into the Tower to await execution. She was executed on Tower Hill. Henry VIII also had the 5th of his 6 wives executed. In addition, King Henry imprisoned Sir Thomas More and Bishop Fisher of Rochester in the Tower, and they were executed because they refused to acknowledge him as the head of the Church of England. Many people were arrested under his monarchy due to religious and political reasons. During his reign, the Tower of London would come to be known as the Bloody Tower.
The Seelbach Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky was so beautiful and iconic that it inspired F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Stepping inside the lobby takes one back to an earlier time with its lavish decor. The Rathskellar down in the belly of the hotel gives flashes of the Prohibition era and wouldn't be surprising to spy Al Capone sitting at a corner table. There are several ghost stories connected to this Louisville treasure that we will share with you here. Join us for the history and hauntings of the Seelbach Hotel.
I have been inside this iconic hotel several times. The first time was on a ghost tour, and there were actually, I think, 18 or 19 of you spookies that joined me on that tour. The second time I met up with a fellow podcaster who was staying there, and we did some exploring. This most recent time, Kelly and I decided that we couldn't pass up the chance to actually stay overnight ourselves. As I said, the lobby is breathtaking with its grand staircase, imported European marble, large murals, and carved wood. The hotel sits near the West Main Street Historic District, and at the time that Louisville was starting as a settlement, the state of Kentucky was still part of the state of Virginia. A rudimentary fort would be the first bit of civilization and was established by Lieutenant Colonel George Rogers Clark in 1778. Louisville would receive its town charter in 1784 and was named for King Louis XVI, who had helped the United States defeat Great Britain during the Revolutionary War. Louisville became a main point of trade since it was near the Ohio River. The railroad arriving in the mid-1850s helped with that growth as well.
The outbreak of the Civil War found Kentucky declaring itself neutral, and it spent much of the war under Union occupation. After the war ended, Louisville experienced enough growth to become an economic powerhouse. The downtown was transformed with new buildings, and this brought entrepreneurs. Otto and Louis Seelbach were brothers who grew up in Frankenthal, Germany, which was a small town in Bavaria. Louis emigrated to the United States in 1869 when he was 17. He traveled to Louisville to learn the hotel business. Louis settled into work at the Galt House Hotel, and he saved up his money so that he could open the Seelbach Bar and Grill in 1874. The restaurant did very well, and Louis used some of his money to bring his brother Otto to Louisville in 1891. Otto helped Louis to open the first rendition of the Seelbach Hotel above the Bar and Grill that same year.
The brothers decided they wanted to build their own hotel, and they chose a spot at the corner of 4th and Walnut Street to do just that. Walnut Street would actually change its name to Muhammad Ali Boulevard in 1978 in honor of the boxing great who grew up in Louisville, and his childhood home is actually there. We didn't get a chance to see that, but we did drive along that boulevard quite a bit.
Yes, we did.
And I have to say, driving in Louisville at night in the rain is a dangerous prospect. Here down in the south, and I know there's some other places, but we have reflectors on the road that your headlights hit so you could see where all the lanes are. It's very easy. Doesn't matter what the weather is. Of course, they can't use these up north because with snowplows and stuff, you just rip them right off the street. So I had no idea. I was like, where are the lanes? It curves around. I couldn't tell where I was.
Thankfully, not a lot of people were on the road at the time.
We had Bailey and Ellie in front of us for a little bit, and I could see she was having just as much trouble as we were, and I talked to her about it the next day, and she's like, yeah, I know, it was crazy. It was so dangerous. Construction on the hotel began in 1905 and was designed by W.J. Dodd and F.M. Andrews in a turn-of-the-century Beaux Arts architectural style. The goal was to give it a luxurious and opulent feel in the style of Parisian hotels. As we said, the lobby is just breathtaking, and one reason is that it is topped by a vaulted dome of 800 glass panels. The floors and columns were formed from imported marble from Italy and Switzerland, and this is trimmed with beautifully carved mahogany and bronze that has a Renaissance styling. On the upper walls encircling the lobby are murals featuring pioneer scenes from Kentucky's history that were painted by artist Conrad Arthur Thomas. He was most well known for his paintings of Native American culture. Turkish and Persian rugs were laid throughout. Guests exit the lobby via a grand staircase that leads to the mezzanine with elevators, a 3,400 square foot ballroom, and the Walnut Room. The hotel also features conference rooms, the Fitzgerald Suite, a grand ballroom, the Presidential Suite, the Seelbach Suite, and 321 guest rooms. When the hotel originally opened, there were only 150 rooms.
When the Seelbach had its grand opening in May of 1905, it was billed as the only fireproof hotel in the city. 25,000 people attended the grand opening. The Seelbach brothers couldn't believe how popular their hotel had become, and they decided that they should immediately start building a 154-room addition, which they began in the fall. In 1907, that expansion was completed, and probably the coolest part of the hotel was added during that expansion, the Rathskellar. When Diane visited the second time, she did a live video for the Spooktacular crew. We'll pull that and post it again on YouTube and Facebook. It was locked when we visited this time, so I only got to experience it through windows, but it still is mind-blowing when viewed from the outside. The walls are decorated with rare rookwood pottery, and this is the world's only room made with this pottery. The patterns were hand-drawn on the soft clay before being fired. The zodiac is preeminent in this space. Not only is there a zodiac clock mounted outside the Rathskellar, but all 12 zodiac signs are featured on the ceiling of the space. There are many pelicans found around the room, and it is thought that this is to symbolize death. This is an event space today, and most likely hosted a variety of things in the past. Definitely a few gangsters here and there, which would have included Lucky Luciano and Dutch Schultz, who was known as the Beer Baron of the Bronx.
I think I'd like to be his friend.
You'd probably end up sleeping with cement shoes.
I probably would, but I'd be complimenting him on his beer. And I know one of your favorite beer makers is up there. Southern Tier is up in New York.
Blackwater series.
Not in the Bronx, but...
Another member of alcohol royalty would be George Remus, who was known as the King of the Bootleggers, and he hailed from the mob in Cincinnati.
And then, of course, there's Al Capone, who comes up on this show quite a bit. His ghost likes to get around, for sure.
Sure does.
He also enjoyed the Seelbach. His favorite spot was the Oak Room, and he enjoyed dining in there, and guests can still dine in a small alcove in the room. Capone also enjoyed blackjack, poker, and bootlegging here. The room is gorgeous. What did you think about it, Kelly?
Oh, it's just absolutely beautiful.
It's absolutely stunning. There's lots of hand-carved American oak paneling on the walls and columns. Did you know the large mirror in that room was a gift from Capone?
I had no idea.
Now, of course, he didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart. He didn't think, oh, I love this hotel so much and I'm, doing all this illegal activity within it. What can I give them? What do you give a hotel that has everything already? I'll give them a big mirror.
I was going to surmise why.
And why do you think that was?
A, so he could see who is coming in by looking in that mirror, so he could see who is approaching his area.
Mm-hmm.
And probably also if they, I don't know, did they ever gamble in there?
Yeah, they were gambling in there.
Well,
see somebody's
cards. Yeah, exactly.
Well, he definitely had it in there so that he could watch his back. This is a very, what I would describe as a male space. Very male.
Definitely.
It was meant to be that way. When the hotel opened, this was known as a gentleman's billiard hall and featured a private bar and card room. There are still cue racks on the south wall. The room also harbors a secret. There was an escape route for the gangsters. A boarded-up panel on the southwest wall hides what had been the doorway to a secret staircase that led to the Rathskellar, which led down to the sub-basement and into a tunnel system with 2 exit paths leading into the city. And I believe this was featured on a Secrets of the Underground episode. I don't know if it was on the Travel Channel or something like that, but they actually show you like where the stairs probably would have been. And this is a place that people don't normally go into and hasn't been seen in a long time. And they even brought the historian in there, which we'll be talking about him in a little bit. And he had never even seen it before. So he was like, whoa, this is so cool.
Yeah, very neat.
And it's kind of interesting because Al Capone wasn't what I would say is a really thin guy.
No, he was, he enjoyed good meals.
Yes, he did. And this staircase was pretty narrow, so it would have been quite the feat for him to worm his way down that staircase.
There were many famous people who stayed here as well. Writer F. Scott Fitzgerald loved the Seelbach, and he enjoyed bourbon and cigars while there. One time he had too much bourbon and was banned for a bit.
Oops, I wonder what he did. Everybody there was drinking, especially bourbon. It's Kentucky after all. It's like, what did he do?
He met some of the gangsters too, and was very taken by George Remus, who many believed inspired the character of J. Gatsby in his novel, The Great Gatsby. The Grand Ballroom was the backdrop for Tom and Daisy Buchanan's wedding reception in the book. The whole hotel really served as an inspiration, and the restaurant off the lobby features that with its name, Gatsby's on 4th. They had a great breakfast buffet, and our hostess Monica regaled us with ghost stories from her house. Carlos was great too. He was our waiter, and he said that he had worked there for 24 years and never experienced anything weird. Monica was an absolute hoot. She was so much fun, very gregarious, great at storytelling, and it just made you want to get up and give her a hug before you left the restaurant itself.
Yeah, and she showed us several videos from her house where she had these weird orbs. And at first when she said, I've got these videos in my house, it's haunted of orbs and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, well, we'll look at them and, be nice about it or whatever. And I was like, holy crap, that is something. Just the way that they were moving. And she had several pugs and they reacted to these orbs. So it was like they could see them or whatever was making those orbs.
Sense them, yeah.
It was very interesting. Now, we ran into the same thing with her that we run into all the time when we go to these places, like you hear about a haunted restaurant or this was a haunted hotel. And so we always ask our waitstaff, hey, have you heard any ghost stories or had anything weird happen to you here? And every time it's like the person's like, I've only been here a couple weeks. She had been there like 2 months.
Right.
She was like, I haven't really had anything weird happen. But that's when she told us about her house. And we were just like, oh gosh, not again.
And Carlos didn't experience anything, but he was an excellent waiter.
He was.
He was so attentive.
And he was very formal. So I think he was like, no, I've never experienced anything weird here.
He was formal but friendly.
Yes, but I think he was kind of trying to poo-poo the ghosty stuff. And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
Several U.S. presidents have stayed here, including William Howard Taft, Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry S. Truman, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, Jimmy Carter, and Bill Clinton. Billy Joel stayed here when he was on tour with Elton John, and he played the piano and sang in the old Seelbach bar.
Can you imagine if you're staying there and you hear the piano playing down there and you're like, wow, who's playing the piano? They've got a great player in there. And then you go in there and you're like, oh my God, it's Billy Joel. And for free. He was just in there. He wanted to play the piano. It'd be like, wow, that would be amazing.
And the piano was beautiful. I wanted to sit down at it myself, even though I've only played keyboard, stand-up organ.
Yeah, that would have been very cool.
Heather French Henry, Miss America 2000, held her wedding reception at the hotel. 2 movies have also shot at the location. The Hustler, starring Paul Newman and Jackie Gleason, and the 2013 movie, The Great Gatsby.
Of course it was filmed there. I mean, where else could you do some of your filming for that other than the hotel that inspired it?
But of course.
Louis Seelbach died in 1925 and Otto followed him 8 years later. The Seelbach Hotel Company couldn't hold itself together and the children of Louis and Otto sold the hotel to Chicago-based businessman Abraham M. Liebling for approximately $2.5 million. He later sold to the Epley Hotel Company, which owned properties throughout the Midwest. Sheridan Hotels bought the Seelbach in 1956 and eventually changed the name to the Sheridan Hotel. Really? Why would you change it to something so boring? Just keep it the Seelbach Sheridan Hotel or something like that. But man.
The Seelbach by Sheraton.
Yeah, or something like that. But I'm like, why would you just change it to something so bland? They later sold to Gotham Hotels. I just love that name. Does Batman own it? In 1968, who returned the name to the Seelbach. Unfortunately, the economy took a hit in 1975 and the company went bankrupt and the Seelbach closed. In the early 1980s, 2 other men, H.G. Wittenberg Jr. and Roger Davis, joined in a partnership with the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company to buy the Seelbach, and they began an extensive renovation. This cost $28 million to complete. If you think about the first time it sold for $2.5 million, and this renovation in the 1980s was $28 million. The Metropolitan Life Insurance Company bought out both Wittenberg and Davis. A subsidiary of Radisson Hotels called the National Hotels Corporation then managed the Seelbach Hotel until Medallion Hotels, Inc. purchased the building in 1990. Medallion Hotels built the conference center. When you park in the parking garage that they have there at the Seelbach, you kind of go in like I'd almost call it a back door, and you walk through the conference center to get into the main part of the hotel. In 1998, Maristar Hotels and Resorts bought the Seelbach Hotel. Investcorp International became the new owner in 2007. Rockbridge Capital bought it in 2017, and it is managed as the Seelbach Hilton Louisville. And so that's what it's called today. Clearly, this hotel has gone through a lot of hands, but they've all done a good job of keeping it up.
The Seelbach Hotel is not shy about their spirits. There are several here. The most famous ghost at the Seelbach is the Lady in Blue. This spirit is said to belong to 24-year-old Patricia Wilson. Her body was found in an elevator shaft on July 16, 1936. She gets her name from the clothes she was found wearing, a long blue dress. As to how she came to be at the bottom of the shaft, there are a couple of stories that are told. The first is a story of suicide. Patricia had either been estranged from her husband or gotten a divorce. The couple decided to try to work things out because they still loved each other, so they agreed to meet at the Seelbach. Unfortunately, her husband got in a car accident on the way to the meeting and was killed. Patricia was devastated. As to how she managed to kill herself jumping down the elevator shaft is anybody's guess. The more probable story was discovered by Larry Johnson, the hotel historian.
So in order to get to this story, we got to go back to this article in a 1955 True Detective magazine. This article was titled Bluegrass Justice for the General. The general being referenced was General Henry Denhart, who had been in the Kentucky National Guard and had been a war hero. He had also been lieutenant governor of the state of Kentucky, so this is not like a nobody. This is somebody well known. The general apparently had been staying at the Seelbach, where Patricia Wilson was working as a lady of the evening. Apparently, Wilson had joined a traveling salesman boyfriend to Louisville, and he abandoned her there. She was destitute and turned to prostitution. The general got in an argument with Wilson, and this was witnessed by a guest on the 8th floor. The guest decided to mind his own business and closed his door. Shortly after that, he heard a loud noise and a woman screaming. The guest ran out into the hallway, and he saw the general running. The story that I saw was towards the elevator. I'm thinking he was more like running from the elevator. It's thought the argument was over his lack of payment for services. Nothing ever happened to the general because nothing could ever be proven.
So again, Larry Johnson is the hotel historian, and he joined the Seelbach team as a bellman in 1982. He has written the definitive book on the hotel called The Seelbach, A Centennial Salute to Louisville's Grand Hotel. He found out that Patricia Wilson's real name was Pearl Elliott. The general finally got caught over another crime he committed. He was engaged to a woman named Verna Garr Taylor. The couple were out on their way for a shopping trip and got into an argument. The general pulled the car over and Taylor got out. He followed her and shot her to death, and this time a witness saw everything. This was a farmer, and the general tried to tell him that his fiancée had committed suicide, but the farmer knew better. The general was arrested and put on trial. He was staying at a hotel with his lawyer, and they were outside talking when two of Verna Garr Taylor's brothers walked up to him and shot him to death.
So apparently he has this thing about killing women and then saying they committed suicide or trying to play it off like suicide.
Karma.
On July 3rd, 1937, the Courier-Journal ran an article with the headline, Girl's Death is Blamed on Denhart. The article reported Brigadier General Henry H. Denhart was accused of causing the death of Miss Patricia Wilson, 25, whose broken body was found on the top of an elevator in the Seelbach Hotel, July 14th, 1936. A suit was filed for $70,000 Friday in the Jefferson County Court by Edward C. Langan, administrator for the girl's estate. The petition, prepared by James T. Robertson, attorney, charges that General Denhart assaulted, beat, and bruised Patricia Wilson, causing her to fall down an elevator shaft in the hotel. And I don't know how does that happen because there's doors. So he had to have pried the doors open or something. Mr. Robertson said it was hoped that filing of the suit would be delayed until completion of the investigation and preparation of the case, but the deadline for filing made it imperative that it be presented without further delay. Robertson had reopened the case because he received several stories from clients who linked Denhart to Patricia Wilson's death. Since Denhart was murdered, the case was never finished. So the final say was the coroner's jury, which reported that Wilson had a fractured skull and 2 broken legs and was discovered by James Embry, an employee of the hotel. He told the coroner's jury he first noticed a glove sticking out of the top of the dummy elevator that is used for carrying linen. In the end, the coroner's jury ruled Wilson died due to her own carelessness and negligence.
That's terrible.
So she just stumbled into the elevator shaft and died all on her own.
Interestingly, Larry Johnson told Spectrum News, I wrote my first book in 2005 on the Seelbach and put the Lady in Blue story in the book. A woman purchased my book and she gave my book to her father. She sent me an email and said, You won't believe this. My father, who was 93 years old, said, I hope you don't hold this against me. This was before I married your mother, but I think I know the lady in blue.
Uh-oh. Did you pay for sex, Dad?
Oh my. Oh my. He told her about a house of ill repute and was introduced to this girl named Lucy in 1935 when he was stationed at Fort Knox. He came back in 1936 with his unit at Fort Knox and went back to the house and asked for Lucy. He was told that Lucy had died in an elevator shaft at the Seelbach Hotel.
So now we have to wonder, is her name Patricia, Pearl, or Lucy?
True.
Because we've got 3 names for this same woman. Now, most of the official reports put her as Patricia Wilson. So I'm thinking that's her real name. And clearly it does seem that she was a sex worker. So I don't know about where the story that, she was supposed to be meeting her husband there and he passed away, or maybe that really did happen and then she became a sex worker because she needed to make money. I don't know, but she was already not with that husband, so who knows? But somehow she ended up at the bottom of an elevator shaft, which I still cannot understand because it's not like elevator doors open and you just kind of stumble into them. So maybe it was broken down and for some reason it malfunctioned and the doors open and she thought she was stepping into the elevator, or I think she was murdered. Many staff members and guests have experienced unexplained things and seen actual apparitions. James Scott was working as a chef at the hotel in 1987. He was cooking waffles and omelets for brunch outside of the Oak Room, and he had a clear view of the elevators. During a break, he saw a young woman with long dark hair and a long blue dress walk into the elevator. This wouldn't seem strange, except the elevator doors were closed. He was unnerved and he called security. They checked the elevator and couldn't get it to work. Engineering came and pried the doors open, and they got the elevator to come to the first floor, and then it worked perfectly fine after that. And these are the elevators that are up there on the mezzanine, so they're more narrow.
Yeah, they're a narrow elevator door, and the elevator itself is very narrow, but yeah, it's very peculiar.
And we could definitely, from the Oak Room, you can definitely see the elevators.
Yep. A housekeeper named Sharon White saw the same woman stepping off the elevator on the 8th floor a few days later. The dress was of an earlier period. That elevator had broken down again and wasn't working, so she ran to tell security. There was no woman in a blue dress found anywhere. Staff at the restaurant reported seeing a woman who looked older wearing very worn and ragged clothing peeking from behind a mirror. Anytime an employee approached her, she would disappear. In 2004, a couple were staying on the 8th floor for their honeymoon. They awoke to find a strange man standing by the window. He was looking out at the city. The room got incredibly cold, and then the figure disappeared. Other things that have happened include ghosts seen in mirrors, the faint scent of an old perfume, disembodied footsteps, and disembodied voices.
Ooh, that old lady perfume gets you every time.
Trust your nose picture, it might be a ghost.
A security guard named Patrick Rhodes is referred to as the Ghost Whisperer because the ghosts seem to like him. Many times when people have taken pictures of him on ghost tours, there are weird anomalies in the photos. A couple times could be explained away, but it happens a lot. Not just orbs, but streaks of lights and fuzzy distortions. I've looked at them and they are very weird, and that it happens to him all the time makes it even weirder. Rhodes says that when he walks the property at night checking doors and such, he whispers the Lord's Prayer to himself to keep the spirits at bay, especially near the Rathskellar. Feels a little bit weird there. So Kelly, you and I stayed on the 8th floor.
We did.
The rooms are very nice. They're really good size and everything's updated. The bathrooms are updated and that kind of thing.
It's quite beautiful.
Now, we didn't get a lot of time to do investigating because the night that we checked in, we went over to Waverly Hills to the sanatorium. And by the time we got done there and got back to the hotel, we just pretty much wanted to go to sleep. We did a little bit of investigating.
We were pretty exhausted.
Yeah, we set the EMF out and we definitely were getting some blips. It would go to yellow and orange. I don't think we ever got a red.
I think we got a red once when it was over closer to the window.
Yeah, maybe. And we checked to make sure there wasn't like EMF in the room and that kind of thing. It definitely liked when we had it sitting on the edge of the bed. It was going off pretty heavily there. But it wasn't anything that I would say was like necessarily responding to us. And then the next day we had a little bit of extra time in the morning before we went over to Jerry's memorial. And so we decided to do a little spirit box session, do some Estes, and it wasn't anything that I did real seriously, so I didn't record our end of stuff. I just kind of wanted to see what was going to come through the spirit box. As I was listening, I kept thinking I was getting these great multi-word answers, but I couldn't understand what was being said. So I was really glad that we had recorded them inside our spirit box, our S box, so that I could listen to them later. So I get home, I put it up, and I start listening to it. Again, they're really hard to understand. I'm going to play a couple of them for you guys here and see if you can kind of tell what's being said. This first one, I thought it was saying something like, I love you, and it's in this one male voice. So I'm going to play that here. I'm going to play it again. And then the same voice came through again, and it almost sounds like it's saying, see them. And I'll play it again. Here's another area. It sounds like it's saying something city. I couldn't get the beginning of it, so I'll play that. And I'll play it again. And now, interestingly, we have a woman's voice that's coming through. I'll play that. And I'll play it again. Wasn't sure what she was saying. As I went along, it was like I would hear the male for a little bit, and then I would hear the female. There was some laughing. And I'm looking, when I am editing, I have the sound waves that come up. So I'm looking at the sound waves, and they're looking familiar to me as I'm grabbing those parts to save these little pieces to play for everybody. I'm like,
right.
The way the sound waves are, they look almost exactly the same. It's like
in terms of the spacing, how far apart they were.
Yes, and the way that the waves go up and down, like when you're getting the beep, 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 those are like little blocks that all look exactly the same. And then all of a sudden there'd be this little area where these would be in there. And they all were very similar in looking. And then I went, looks like the same distance. So then I would like calculate in my brain, and I was like, okay, it looks like there's 0.35 seconds between each one. And when I would add it to the one that I was looking at, and then I would fast forward to see where the next one was, sure enough, they were all equal in the same spots. I could guess where I would have another one come through. So then I went, what do I have going on here? Are we picking up? And I was doing the AM because I tried doing FM too. And to me, I just can't do the FM on a spirit box because to me, I can tell that the radio stations are coming through. And this Xbox can go all the way up to 5. So it's like beep, 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 beep. I mean, it's going through really fast. I usually was keeping it at about a 3. So it was going through there pretty quickly. At first I went, well, what we were doing is in those specific spots, I must have been picking up a radio station. So there was a radio signal in those spots, but nowhere else. Which Louisville AM station, I would think we'd pick up more than one. So I thought that was a little bit weird. But then the other thing is, these are a multi-word. If I was just getting like like one word, 2 words, it would be easier for me to be like, well, I was just picking up a radio station.
Yeah, debunking it.
But because it was going like dot, 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 I don't think if I was picking up a radio station, those answers would be that long. Because the
there's
radio
no
station
way because it's blipping through them too quickly.
Yeah. So I don't know what was going on here. I don't know if I was picking up some kind of a station frequency or if that particular spot on the band was where the spirits were coming through.
I tend to believe that the second is the more
And if
accurate.
that's true, there was a man and woman having a conversation with each other. I don't know that they were specifically talking to me. If they were, unfortunately, I wasn't recording my end of the conversation, so I don't remember what I was asking. But just interesting. So I'd love to know what you guys think.
It's a mystery. The Seelbach Hotel is not to be missed. We honestly can't wait to stay there again. It was so magnificent. We didn't have anything we would define as ghostly activity, but many people have, especially around the elevators on the mezzanine. Is the Seelbach Hotel haunted?
That is for you to decide. Great spot in Louisville. And there's a lot of walkable places in that vicinity to go to eat and that kind of thing. But you really don't even need to leave the hotel. The restaurant was absolutely fabulous. We'd love to have you guys check out our website at historygoesbump.com. And if you'd like to leave us some feedback, you can do that at historygoesbump@gmail.com or at any of our various social media. Please follow us over on YouTube. Please subscribe to us. Subscribe to the podcast. And we'd love your reviews. We don't ask for them very often, so we don't get them very often. But if you have an ability to review on whatever you happen to be listening through, we'd love to get those. I want to thank you guys for tuning into this episode. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye. This episode has been brought to you by our executive producers.
Be sociable. Drop the chain rattling, neck biting, and shape shifting, and join us on Facebook and Twitter at History Goes Bump. Like the page and follow us.
In the month of January, on the 25th in 1533, Ken Henry, do it. I'm Ken Henry the Eighth. I am Ken Henry the Eighth. I am.
Lord.
Oh, good Lord.
The goal was to give it a luxurious and opulent feel in the style of Parisian hotels.
Parisian.
What? Hooked on phonics. Shouldn't that be Paris and then Ian, I-A-N, Parisian?
No. Just no.
Apparently not. But that's what I do, hooked on phonics. Like I said, if it can be said wrong, I can say it wrong.
The dress was what?
It was what? Okay.
The dress was what? Oh, my word. What won't come out of my mouth?
Apparently your mouth
Good
is done
grief.
working for the day.
Yeah, clearly.